Did you serve our country? A long time ago, he said quietly. Then let me serve you now, she replied softly. He was a weary stranger, yet there was a light in his eyes. Sarah didn't know his name, only that he had walked into her small diner on a cold night, and she had offered him a warm meal. She expected nothing in return, just doing what felt right. But what happened next would leave an entire town in awe. A month later, 2 black SUVs parked outside the little diner. The same man stepped out, now in a crisp military uniform, his eyes unmistakably familiar. He had returned not just to say thank you, but to change her life forever. This is the story of how a simple act of kindness by a struggling single mother sparked a wave of goodwill beyond imagination. Welcome to Graceful Valor Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Greenville, Pennsylvania, a town where people's lives move slow, like the leaves falling off the maples in October. There were no secrets here, only whispers passed between neighbors, old stories told over coffee, and eyes that noticed everything. For Sarah Monroe, life was a series of unfinished tasks and unanswered bills. A single mother of 3, 2 boys in middle school, and a baby girl just turning 3, Sarah lived on overtime shifts, discounted groceries, and prayers she mumbled while folding laundry late at night. She didn't complain much, there was no time for that, not when daycare cost more than rent, and her car engine sounded like it coughed in its sleep. Her job at Hank's Diner wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. She worked the evening shifts, the ones most folks didn't want: less tips, more scrubbing, fewer smiles, more silence. Still, she showed up apron wrinkled, eyes tired, hair pinned up with the same blue pen she used to help her sons with homework after midnight. It was a Tuesday night, the kind that wrapped the town in cold fog and made headlights glow like ghosts. Inside the diner, only 2 booths were occupied: a trucker nursing his 4th cup of black coffee, and a college kid scribbling in a textbook with headphones in. Sarah wiped down the counter, stole a glance at the clock, 9:53 p.m., just over an hour until closing. That's when the door creaked open. The man who entered looked lost, not in direction, but in life. His coat was worn thin, boots dirty, shoulders heavy, like he hadn't rested in weeks. He paused at the door, uncertain. She noticed the hesitation, the kind you see in people not sure if they're welcome. Then he stepped inside and took the farthest booth, booth 9, the one right next to the old jukebox that hadn't worked since 2015. Sarah grabbed a menu and approached with gentle caution. "Good evening, sir. Can I get you started with some coffee?" He looked up slowly, like it took effort. His face was sunburned in places, pale in others, eyes sunken, voice dry. "Yes, please." As she poured the coffee, she noticed the way his hand trembled slightly, not from cold, but something deeper, something she'd seen in her cousin who came back from Afghanistan and never talked again. "Kitchen's open another hour," she said. "Can I get you something to eat?" He hesitated, his lips parted, then closed again. "I don't have much," he admitted quietly. "Maybe just toast." Her hands stilled. "Tell you what, how about a proper meal? No charge." He sat up straighter. "I can't accept that." "You served?" she asked softly. His gaze dropped to the table. "A long time ago." "Then let me serve you now." He didn't answer, but the nod he gave was slow, heavy, and filled with something she couldn't name. 10 minutes later, she brought him a plate: scrambled eggs, sausage, hash browns, and pancakes drizzled with maple syrup. She set it down with a smile and walked away before he could say no. He stared at the food for a long moment before lifting his fork. The first bite stopped him cold, his eyes closed, shoulders relaxed just a bit, like something inside him remembered what it felt like to be human. Sarah didn't hover, she gave him space, checking on the other customers, pretending not to notice how slow he chewed or how long he sat in silence. When he finally stood up, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a few wrinkled bills. "For the coffee," he said. She shook her head gently. "It's on the house, all of it." He looked at her as if trying to understand something. "People don't usually do that anymore." "They should," she replied, smiling. He stared a moment longer, then said softly, "You have no idea what this meant." As he turned to leave, the wind howled outside. He paused by the door, looking back at her one last time. "You're a kind soul, miss," he said. More than you know." And then he was gone. The bell above the door jingled, then silence fell again. Sarah stood still for a while, her hand resting on the coffee pot, her mind far away. Something about that man, his silence, his sorrow, stuck with her, but she had no idea that this quiet night in her small corner of the world would become the beginning of something far bigger than she could imagine. What ripple effect would her kindness unleash? Days passed, then weeks. Life, as it does, moved on. Sarah never expected anything from that night. In fact, she thought about it less and less because there was simply no time. Her youngest daughter, Lily, caught a nasty cough that kept her up 3 nights in a row. The boys were growing faster than she could keep up, both in size and in attitude. Bills kept coming, the hours at the diner stayed the same, tips were hit or miss depending on the weather and whether the big rigs rolled through town. Every so often, when booth 9 was empty and the jukebox caught the corner of her eye, she'd remember him, the quiet man with trembling hands and tired eyes. But as the weeks turned into a month, Sarah assumed he was just passing through, like 1,000 other souls she'd served one meal, one small moment. Then came the Tuesday. It was just like any other, cloudy skies, light lunch crowd. One waitress called in sick, so Sarah had to cover the morning shift, too. She was dead on her feet by 3 p.m. and still had the closing shift ahead of her. By dinner time, the diner buzzed with the usual low chatter, retirees at their usual booth, a couple arguing quietly over pie, 2 mechanics with grease-stained hands laughing over burgers. Nothing out of the ordinary until the air changed. It wasn't the kind of thing you could explain, just a quiet stillness that crept through the space like a breath being held. Through the large diner windows, headlights flashed against the dusky evening. 2 vehicles pulled up to the curb, not just any vehicles, black, gleaming, silent SUVs, big ones, the kind with tinted windows and government plates. People in the diner paused. One man leaned closer to the window, another lowered his fork mid-bite. The door opened. Out stepped 2 men in suits, sharply pressed, stoic, earpieces glinting in the fading light. Behind them, a third figure emerged. Sarah dropped her rag. It was him, same face, same eyes, but different. The coat was gone. In its place, a crisp military uniform decorated with so many medals they seemed to catch the light on their own. Shoulders squared, posture steady, presence undeniable. General James Holloway, the man she had served toast and eggs a month ago. He walked in like the air bent around him, not arrogant, not loud, just sure, like a man who had walked through fire and came out colder, stronger. The diner fell completely silent. Sarah stood frozen behind the counter, heart racing, hands damp. He walked straight toward her. "Miss Monroe," he said, his voice calm, but full of weight. "I hope I'm not interrupting." She blinked. "General Holloway." He nodded. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I never forgot." The general's expression softened just a bit. "Good, because I came back for a reason." Everyone in the diner was watching. Phones appeared silently, recording from tabletops. Holloway turned to address the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I won't take much of your time. I came here not as a general, but as a man who, for a brief moment, was treated like a human being when he felt forgotten." He looked back at Sarah. "You didn't ask who I was. You didn't care what I had. You saw someone tired, and you gave him warmth, dignity, a meal." Sarah's throat tightened, the room around her blurred. "I've eaten at presidential tables," Holloway continued, "but nothing has ever meant more than that booth, that plate, and your words, 'Let me serve you now.'" From behind, one of the suited men stepped forward, holding a thick envelope. Holloway took it, offered it to Sarah. She hesitated. "What is this?" He smiled faintly. "Just a small thank you, a start." She opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a check, $10,000. Her knees nearly gave way. "No, I can't." "You can," the general said, "and you will, because kindness like yours isn't just rare, it's necessary." "And I'm not done." But what more could he possibly offer? Before she could speak, the general nodded toward the second SUV. The rear door opened, and the diner held its breath. The man who stepped out wasn't in uniform. He was young, early 20s, clean-cut, but thin, like someone who'd been through something that aged him faster than it should. He looked nervous, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the diner until they landed on Sarah. Then he walked toward her. General Holloway turned slightly. Miss Monroe, this is Private First Class Tyler Green. The young man nodded politely. Ma'am. Sarah gave a faint smile, still stunned. Hello. He was under my command, Holloway explained, Afghanistan 2020. He was injured during an ambush, medevaced home, quiet kid, never asked for much. But a few weeks ago, he was struggling real bad, he'd lost touch, lost his footing. And then he told me something that stopped me cold. He looked at Tyler. You can tell her. Tyler cleared his throat, his voice barely above a whisper. I saw you that night. I was across the street, sleeping in the alley behind Miller's Hardware. Sarah's heart thumped. She hadn't noticed anyone else that night, but now she remembered the way the lights from the diner reflected faintly on the opposite sidewalk, a shadow, one she'd ignored. I hadn't eaten in 2 days, Tyler said. Didn't think anyone would help, but then I saw you give that man a hot meal. You didn't even ask his name, just gave. He looked up, eyes wet. It changed something in me. I walked across town and asked for help at the vet center, first time I'd asked anyone for anything since I came home. Sarah's lips parted. I had no idea. You didn't have to, Holloway said. That's the thing, your kindness didn't stop with me, it spread quietly, like all real goodness does. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. She didn't know whether to cry or speak, she just stood there, overwhelmed by the ripple effect of one moment she'd barely remembered. Then came another surprise. From the front door, someone entered, this time, a woman, early 40s, wearing a tan overcoat and holding a clipboard. Her demeanor was gentle but purposeful. Excuse me, she said softly, are you Miss Sarah Monroe? Sarah nodded cautiously. My name is Rebecca Shaw, I'm with the Community Grant Network. General Holloway contacted us 2 weeks ago. She held out a letter. He wanted us to find a way to support people who make a difference, especially those who do it quietly. Sarah opened the envelope. It was a letter of confirmation for a $25,000 grant issued to Hank's Diner under her name for equipment upgrades, supply restocks, or however she saw fit. Rebecca added, you don't need to repay it, it's yours. The room fell into silence again, but this time it felt like reverence, the kind reserved not for celebrities or politicians, but for everyday people who did something quietly extraordinary. I don't even know what to say, Sarah whispered. You don't have to say anything, Holloway replied. You already did, that night, without a single word. He turned to Tyler, who smiled, still unsure of himself, but standing a little taller, and then to the room. This is what service looks like, not always with medals, not always in uniform, sometimes it's just a plate of food offered with love. The diner was still holding its breath, as if the walls themselves were listening. Sarah, still gripping the envelope, felt the room spin slightly. $25,000, it didn't even seem real. The weight of it wasn't just financial, it was emotional, a validation she never expected, a recognition she didn't think someone like her could ever receive. Holloway stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough for only those nearby to hear. There's one more thing, he said. Sarah blinked. Sir, this is already too much. Not when you consider how far a single act of kindness can reach, he replied, and I don't believe in leaving good work unfinished. He nodded toward the second SUV again. Another suited man opened the back hatch. Inside wasn't gold or medals or more envelopes, it was a vehicle, not just any, a fully equipped food truck, painted in clean white and military green. On the side, printed in bold navy blue letters, were the words, Sarah's Table, serving with kindness. Below the name was a small emblem, a plate and fork overlaying the American flag. Sarah gasped. No, that can't be real. It is, Holloway said, smiling now, fully licensed, fully stocked, mobile, yours. She took a step back, both hands over her mouth. But I wouldn't know where to start. You already did, he said. He placed a set of keys in her palm. With this truck, you can take what you do beyond these walls. You can serve veterans at shelters, at disaster sites, or just in places where kindness is rare, wherever your heart leads you. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. She looked around the room, half expecting someone to tell her it was all a prank, but the faces staring back, friends, strangers, even Tyler with tears in his eyes, all told her this was real. I'm not anyone special, she whispered. You are, Holloway said, because you saw someone when others looked away. He turned to face the crowd again. Too often we overlook the quiet heroes, the ones who don't carry weapons but carry compassion. Tonight, we honor one of those heroes. The diner erupted into applause. For a long moment, Sarah didn't move, she simply stood in the noise, holding the keys to a new future, trying to absorb the truth. This wasn't a reward, this was a mission. It didn't all change overnight. The next day, Sarah still woke up early to pack lunches for her boys and warm a bottle for baby Lily. She still juggled bills and worked double shifts. The grant helped, the check helped, but life, real life, doesn't magically become easy. But something had shifted, and it wasn't just in her bank account. People started showing up. Veterans she'd never met stopped by just to say thank you. Families came to eat, to support, to share stories. A teacher brought her students for a lesson in kindness, and local church groups offered to help stock the diner pantry. And the truck, Sarah's table, it didn't sit idle. The first place she drove it to was the local shelter on the east side of town, where a line of homeless veterans had already formed before dawn. She served pancakes and hot coffee with a trembling hand and a heart so full it felt like it would burst. The next week, she parked outside a flood-damaged community center and handed out warm meals to families who had lost everything. It didn't matter who they were, she served them all, no forms, no questions, just food and dignity. She never forgot what Holloway told her: you already started, now let the world see how far kindness can go. And it did. One night, a man left a note folded beside his empty plate. Your kindness fed more than my stomach today, it reminded me I still matter. She kept it taped behind the counter. As for Tyler Green, he visited often, never asked for a discount, always sat at booth 9, sometimes he'd help serve, sometimes he'd just sit, sketching on napkins. And every now and then, a black SUV would quietly park outside the diner. General Holloway never stayed long, but he always came in with a smile, left a generous tip, and gave Sarah a nod of quiet respect, the kind that needed no words. On the wall by the entrance, Sarah had hung a photo. It showed the food truck, a line of people, and a small hand-painted sign in front that read, "Kindness served here, no questions asked." The photo frame wasn't fancy, but it caught every eye that walked through the door. And slowly, people started bringing their own kindness, small things: a box of donated blankets, a stack of job application forms, a father and daughter dropping off coats they had outgrown. Kindness had taken root, and it all started because one woman, on one quiet night, offered a plate of eggs and pancakes to a stranger who had nothing left but his name. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who helps wants recognition, some just need to know that today, someone isn't going hungry. And sometimes, that alone is enough to change a life. You may forget the story, but if no one retells it, history stays silent forever. Subscribe to Graceful Valor Stories, where justice is honored, kindness is remembered, and no act of quiet heroism is ever lost.